Okay, we'll start. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the land acknowledgement. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. The lands we know today as the Township of Centre Wellington have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Centre Wellington, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and in the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold the treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Centre Wellington remains home to the Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Addendums and corrections to the agenda. Disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Yes, Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Just for clarification, I have declared a conflict on the Centre Wellington parking strategy in the past. However, given that the report 8.5 tonight is specific to Elora and for information purposes only, I will not be declaring a conflict this evening.
Thank you for that. Presentation and announcements. 5.1 County Councillor report. I'd like to welcome our colleague and a County Councillor colleague, Mary Lloyd, to the lecturate. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for an opportunity to present the update on what the county's been up to. The first item is to do with the OPP. They presented their 2026-2029 Detachment Action Plan. This is updating the report that's expiring this year in 2025. So there's some interesting things in there with how they're going to work hard on helping us feel safe in our community. Joint Social Services and Land Ambulance. I'm going to focus a little bit on childcare tonight. I just wanted to say that we're very excited that the tender has been issued and Wellington Place in Aboyne will be adding 15 spaces and the work is going to begin immediately. There was also a very exciting opportunity that came forward in the Mount Forest Childcare and Early Learning Center, where they're expanding another 31 spaces for children there, which is Mount Forest was one of the areas, or Wellington North was one of the areas that was desperately underserved. So to see 31 spaces go there is very exciting. Information Heritage and Seniors saw a busy month with Halloween and remembrance services and things that were going on at the terrace and the museum with participation from the Royal Canadian Legion. We had special events that were happening. The terrace is busy with upgrades that will be coming to their HVAC system. But more importantly, at the terrace, we opened the Living Classroom. It is a very exciting opportunity that's happening for students to be able to study for PSW that they started in September and they will graduate in June. This is an opportunity to study and learn in an exemplary place. Wellington Terrace is very special, and the Upper Grand School Board and the Province of Ontario endorsed this location as of great worth to help with the PSW program. Wellington County Museum and Archives finished the upgrades to the bell tower and it's back in place and will soon be opening our new child space. We had celebrations for Halloween and remembrance, and the committee received all kinds of excitement going on with their update. They also had the exciting opportunity to install the peace pole. And I'd like to say thank you very much to Councillor Evoy for heading that up with the Legions and Rotary to see that that happened. That was a very nice addition to Wellington Place. Also, we received our Indigenous exhibit strategy. So many of you have remembered that we've had a static exhibit in the museum on Indigenous. And this study will help guide and give us the best directions to continue with next steps for a respectful, meaningful place, and to share Wellington County's Indigenous history and guide our involvement in Indigenous people going forward. Wellington County Museum and Archives is also hosting the Christmas market. There's over 50 artisans from across Wellington County that will be there Friday from 4 to 9 and Saturday from 12 until 5. Erin Library is moving along, but it's not exempt to the challenges that happen with tariffs and preservation to historical buildings. So we want you to stay tuned for an update on when that will be opening in the new year. Of course, the libraries are humming along with activities, and they continue to rent or loan out, I should say, energy toolkits, which help our residents test if they're losing warmth around their windows or if they need to upgrade their HVAC system. They are also in partnership with the public health and distributing radon detectors. So it's important that those are available through the library for people to pick up and to borrow the toolkit. On the Roads Committee, back in February, I began attending the Elora BIA meetings, and I was going there because I had updates to deliver with regards to our recycling cart program. But while attending, the BIA executive requested my help in changing the intersection of Metcalfe and Mill. That's Wellington Road 21 and 18. Through my request, the county engineer initiated an intersection study, and it was conducted in August and September. The study recommended changing the lights to pedestrian interval and no right turn on red. I've spoken against this idea as it slows traffic with no turn on right, and not implementing the change of a full pedestrian scramble is going to make it difficult for people. Pedestrian intervals gives pedestrians an advantage of 4 to 6 seconds to begin crossing the street. That's why there's no right turn on red. And no right turn on red is a very foreign thing in Wellington County. We don't have a lot of intersections that are no right turn on red. So it's sad to me to be able to say to the Elora BIA, I failed in their request. However, I'm continuing to ask for reconsideration to look at this intersection. In the study in August, September, they identified at one point there were 1,000 pedestrians crossing. That's a lot of people. And that was in a time when we weren't in a height of the monsters or the height of the Christmas with the winter lights. So I just let you know I'm still at odds with that issue. Solid Waste is looking at extending commercial and industrial recycling. So there'll be some changes coming forward with renewed interest in the spring of 2026 to look at that. There are delays in the transfer station, and this is to do with being the best service model that we can be. We know that the Elora station is the highest used transfer station in the county and want to be sure that we have it right the first time. So we're working towards a mid-January opening. Our tipping fee was moved up to $160 per ton. And our administration, finance, and HR, we renewed our physician recruitment support for the next 3 years. It's important for us to have an influence and be part of the team working towards bringing doctors to Wellington County. We designated the surplus from our budget for 2025 to help fund the changes that will be happening to garbage. So it's approximately a change that will move from the carts that you see downtown for recycling to carts at individual homes for garbage and recycling. So we're working towards those changes. On a personal note, as the chair of the Fergus BIA Christmas Light Renewal Program, I want to extend my gratitude to Councillors Jefferson and Evoy for their help on the project, to Centre Wellington Hydro for the upcoming installation of the halos. Many hands make light work, and with Jamie Hiller of HR Machines, we've achieved extending the life expectancy of our Christmas lights 8 to 10 years. And that's my report.
Thank you, Mary. Comments, questions for Mary? Again, thank you for your support on the intersection there. I know that discussion will continue. I will personally grab some of the engineers and I'll bring them to Elora and we can stand there and try to make a turn. But I'll drive them in my vehicle and we'll wait at that one intersection for a while. So we'll work on that. But I appreciate your efforts, Councillor McDonald.
Just on that note, Mayor, yes, I delegated at county and saw Mary that day, and because the disappointment was we don't know if we need a scramble. It was that there's 4 corners to an intersection and Elora was left out of the picture, and it was more county roads that were utilized, but there were higher tourism days that could have been utilized better. So they know that now and going forward. You were there. I also asked how many transport trucks and gravel trucks are coming through Elora, and there's no restrictions. And so that was good to chat about that too. I guess I do have one question though. Do we know how many children need daycare at the moment?
Thank you, through you, Mayor, or through to you, Councillor McDonald. At the beginning of the year, we were about 1,300 spaces short. So we're slowly chipping away at that total. It's a big number. We are aware of, and we're disappointed that a school opening in Drayton has been delayed, which was going to be offering some other childcare spots as well. So that has been delayed for another year. But our team at the county with childcare, they're working very hard and touring different buildings. I myself sent them a building to investigate to see if it is a potential investment for the county to bring more childcare. There's nothing more disappointing than a parent who's ready to head back to work and unable to secure care for their child.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments for Mary, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing you later on this week. Okay.
To the rest of you, I hope you have a wonderful, blessed season of joy and love and peace.
Okay, we'll move down now to item 5.2, Councillor Committee updates. Council, any updates? Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. The Elora BIA met on the 10th of November with high attendance for their AGM. They passed their 2026 budget and other projects that they're looking at. Plus, they appointed 3 new board members. And then their Starlight Shopping, their final week is this week. So there are 2 nights, are Thursday and Friday night this week. So if you want to get downtown and join all the tourists for all the lights.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or comments about your committees? Councillor McDonald?
Last Thursday, the seniors, Victoria Senior Center had their annual AGM. It went very well, and we welcome new members, and they met quorum, and their updated constitution will come back to council December 15th.
Okay. Councillor Welton?
I just actually have a question for you. I'm just curious if you'll be bringing a report on what's happening with the GRCA and all of the amalgamations of conservation authorities at a future meeting, or thank you.
Yeah, we have a meeting on Friday to circle back on all that kind of stuff. So after that, our next council meeting, I'll bring a report back to council for that. Any other questions, comments, committee stuff? Okay, then we'll move down to delegations. None. Consent items. Consent agenda items are considered routine in nature and are voted on collectively. However, any member of council may request 1 or 2 more items be removed from consent agenda for separate discussion and or action. So I'll just read the recommendation. Recommendation that the Council Township of Centre Wellington approve consent agenda items 7.1 through, it should say 7.9. And I'll just get a mover and a seconder on that. Mover, Councillor Adams, seconder on Councillor Evoy. Any comments or questions on the agenda? Yes, Councillor Wilton.
I'd just like to comment on item 7.2 and have a couple of questions for staff, I think, on that one.
I'd like to speak to 7.2 or ask your question.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Waters. I'm just kind of curious. I know I raised some concerns about this designation at the last meeting about the intent to designate discussion. And I'm still a little bit perplexed about where the owner is on all of this and if what the actual plan is for the house. Because right now by the pictures, it looks like there's a kind of a derelict stone building in the middle of a subdivision. And it looks like there could be room for 4 to 6 townhouses in that location, or perhaps a little pocket park. So I'm just curious if this really is the best use of that space and what can be done to make sure the house is actually restored and brought into some type of better community use. Thank you.
Who would like to speak to that?
Deanna's here, but I can speak to this item, and if I get in trouble, she can fill in the blanks. Throughout the course of the secondary plan study, they did a cultural heritage evaluation report, and it recommended that the dwelling remain, ideally in situ, which is where it is. And that's reflected in the secondary plan policies. The subdivision design and the zoning was specifically it's different than the surrounding zoning. It's in a kind of a mixed use zone to allow more opportunity for the dwelling to be converted to different uses. And the subdivision's been designed around it. There's a little parkette just been built behind it, and that's just completed. It was kind of a partnership between the township and the developer. We've just signed off on the completion of that park to our satisfaction. So it's certainly, we've not heard any different from the developer that there's not an intent to retain the dwelling. They've been given notice first that this item would be coming forward, that we'd be moving it to designate. They would been given notice of the Heritage Committee meetings where it was discussed. They got the notice of intention to designate. They have an opportunity to appeal, which they didn't. If council passes the bylaw, they get another opportunity to appeal. And then by virtue of having designated, opens the opportunity for our Heritage Grant program. So if the designation proceeds, we'll speak to them about that. Also, in terms of the maintenance, it enhances our powers under property standards to require the maintenance of that building. So we certainly will speak to them about that.
Any other questions as it relate to Farley? I have further on that. On the original site plan, would they not have identified that would have been a building that they were intending on keeping and would have been part of a site plan? And I know this was before our council was here, because I don't recall that, but I would think that would have been part of the visioning for that property.
Yeah, that's correct. It's on a kind of a special lot that was created with dimensions meant to accommodate the house sitting there. And as I said, the zoning as well is site specific to that particular property. So the lot, it's deeper than all of the other surrounding lots to give it that little bit extra room in recognition of the dwelling being there.
Just further that, I think part of the, and I've heard it from folks that live in that part of the community, whatever is the disappointment has been that the developer hasn't done anything. They've just kind of let this sit. And we know that that's usually not a good thing to do with buildings, because they appear to become derelict. And that is not a good position to leave these properties, because they can be subject to vandalism and that. So yeah, my hope that with us sort of moving this along, that they'll pick up on that and put it in a position where it should really be respected. Anyways, any other further comments as it relates to this section? No? Okay. So we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Okay, so moved. Okay, now consideration of reports. We'll start with the transit feasibility study progress report, and I see Colin there. Welcome, Colin.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Waters and members of council. So with us tonight, we have Dennis Carr. Dennis is with Dillon Consulting, and he's the transit planning lead at Dillon, and Dillon's helping the township out, kind of navigate the transit feasibility study. And just wanted to provide just maybe just a quick highlights of kind of what we've been up to the last couple of months. It's been a kind of a flurry of consultation activities, just kind of working through our first round of consultation, and kind of kick things off back on October 16th. We were at the Key Projects Open House. We did consultations in the high school, in a couple of the classes, and in the cafeteria as well, and we were at Healthy Communities Advisory Committee earlier this month. And really key to this, we got some really good feedback through, we formed a technical advisory committee with the other transit providers in the area. So we have representatives from Ridewell, so County of Wellington. We have Guelph Transit, Grand River Transit. We have Guelph Transit and the Guelph Tow and Sound representation on our TAC. And we got, I think, a fairly decent response to our survey. So I know we were competing with the budget survey, so maybe that took away from it a little bit. But we got 356 responses to the survey, so that's great. It was online. We also did some paper versions as well for people that didn't have online access. So we're just kind of collecting all that data. Dennis has some summaries of that as well in his presentation. And I think with that, I'll hand it over to Dennis to kind of walk council through the presentation. Devlin's going to pull it up on the screen here, and yeah, that's your way to navigate there.
Well, welcome, Dennis.
Thank you. Okay, so appreciate you having me here today to give a sort of a brief update on where we are today in terms of the transit feasibility study. So thank you for that introduction, Colin. Okay, here we go. Okay, so just to give you a bit of an update on where we're at today, we initiated this study back in August of 2025. And really the first part of the study is just to get a better understanding of what are some of the needs, the existing transportation options that are available, and plan for engagement, which started in the fall of 2025. And I won't get into that because Colin described a lot of what we did, but a number of stakeholder interviews, the community survey, which was both online and in person and on paper as well. Some unique engagement activities such as that high school presentation, which was just a really good way to engage with youth in our community, as well as participation in the sort of regular public open house that is conducted, and got a lot of good feedback from that. So where we are right now is we're here today presenting a bit of a background of what we heard and what we saw from our initial engagement. We'll take this and start to develop some concepts, and we've already developed some preliminary concepts, which I'll talk to you about today. And we'll go back to the public in the winter of 2026 to do a second round of engagement to say, hey, this is what we thought of. What are your thoughts? Did we get it right? And then we'll develop those final recommendations based on what we heard. So tweaking things as we need to based on input from members of the public and stakeholders. And we'll be back here to present in the spring our final recommendations. So in terms of what we heard, we heard a lot of good feedback from members of the public. First of all, there's a wide range of trips that need to be accommodated, right? So people are looking for transit opportunities for both regular commutes and discretionary trips. And although Centre Welling does have Ridewell that's currently in place, Ridewell is meant to be more of a rural to sort of rural service and doesn't always meet the needs of sort of a growing urban area, right? And as you continue to grow and expand as a community, particularly in Fergus and Elora, to accommodate that need and number of trips, and you'll see that a little later on in my presentation, sort of people are looking for sort of that higher level of service to accommodate those needs. There was a broad level of support for transit that sort of meets those needs that they're looking for. There's suggesting that service should be affordable for passengers as well as the township. So looking at that sustainability in terms of that municipal investment, but also, can I use this for my day-to-day travel, and is it affordable? Is it affordable, particularly as we're experiencing affordability crisis? Prioritizing connections to Guelph was important, particularly to the GO network, but also internal travel within Centre Wellington, in particular between Fergus and Elora. And as I said before, the existing transit service does not always meet the needs of residents, right? So what can we do to sort of grow and expand that? From stakeholders, a lot of similar feedback that we heard. Connectivity between Fergus and Elora was important, as well as north-south within Fergus. Looking to peer agencies with established transit networks to identify sort of what's the right level of service, what are some unique service models that are being employed. So, not reinventing the wheel, looking at best practices elsewhere. Fare and service integration with existing local and regional services. So, Ridewell continues. There's the GHOST service that operates between Owen Sound and Guelph with stops in Fergus and Elora. Are those services integrated with something that we may do specifically within Fergus, Elora, or Centre Wellington? Direct routes are important. So as opposed to sort of meandering connectivity with active transportation, both pedestrian and cycling, an interest in accommodating high school students. A lot of that obviously feedback came from the direct engagement we received from engaging at the high school. So in terms of demand, one of the things we also look at is when we plan a transit system, we want to look at what the overall travel demand is, and how do we best design a system that accommodates that demand. So looking at what's called the Transportation Tomorrow Survey, which is a survey that's done every 5 years across the Greater Golden Horseshoe that looks at how people travel. We noted that the majority of the demand is travel opportunities within Fergus itself, followed by that connection between Fergus and Elora, and then probably third was between Fergus and Elora and Guelph. So those are the primary sort of travel demand opportunities. And again, that's where we want to focus that transit service design, is where we can meet the highest potential to accommodate where people want to travel to. So that's just done at a sort of a very high level. We took a look at some of your peers, both peers based on sort of a similar population of where you are today, but recognizing that you're experiencing a significant amount of growth. We looked at peers that are larger, and we looked at a number of things, including sort of how much service is provided per capita. Right. And the amount of service also dictates sort of the amount people are going to use the service, because you have to have a certain level to make it useful for people to use it and travel on it. We looked at the rides per capita, and the rides per hour, so which is more of that productivity of the service. So you can see some sort of statistics here, along with where we're at today with the combination of the Ridewell and Go service. Now you'll notice the level of investment within Fergus Elora is much lower than many of your peers today, and that also equates to lower boardings per capita, so the percentage of your population that's using it and the overall productivity. So we're trying to find out what is that right balance of level of investment and what we can expect in terms of ridership and productivity of the service, and looking to phase that in as Centre Wellington continues to grow. So in terms of what we can expect, we sort of started on sort of some preliminary sort of look at what ridership could look like and what the amount of service could look like based on the peers, looking at sort of that similar boardings per capita and service hours per capita. And we could sort of see a range of between 20 and 30,000 annual service hours. Could be sort of possible for Centre Wellington, particularly as the community grows. So we wouldn't start with that right away, but it's sort of phasing that up. And also a ridership range as well. And the ridership is really dependent on what type of service and what the level of service is. So this provides us just with a very high level kind of estimate of what we can expect. As we start to develop our service options, we're going to narrow that down. But this is kind of used as a guidepost to see what other communities are doing of similar size and what we can expect. And of course, that's when we start to take a look at what the costs are of providing that service, both capital and operating. In terms of concepts and service options, we explored 3 options that we're going to carry forward. Concept 1 is looking at sort of extending the existing tourism shuttle between Fergus and Elora that operates seasonally and on weekends and Fridays. And, you know, it's a fairly well-used route. So what does that look, and it's getting some usage from local residents as well, and not just visitors. So what does that look like if it's sort of extended to 5 days a week and potentially 7 days a week during peak tourist season? And in this concept, we would sort of potentially extend on the existing on-demand service to sort of cover off the rest of Fergus, Elora, and the more rural parts of the township as well, and continue to support that fixed route that goes between Fergus, Elora, and the city of Guelph, with, you know, potential of on-demand into the region of Waterloo as well. So this one has the lowest potential cost because it's sort of only putting that fixed route on that sort of high demand corridor and utilizing the on-demand. But on-demand tends to carry sort of less ability to carry a high volume of passengers per hour. That productivity is lower because you're not operating on that fixed dense corridor. So lowest ridership potential in this option. Option 2 sort of builds on option 1 and continues with that east-west service in Fergus, Elora, but also looks at a north-south Fergus to Fergus service as well, which, you know, where we identified the majority of the demand being, and continued sort of ride well service outside of that. So potentially expanding into certain parts of Elora as well, but utilizing sort of a greater number of fixed routes between Fergus, Elora, and within the communities as well, and that on-demand operated by Ridewell, sort of focusing on the more rural parts of the township. And then continued with that regional connection between Fergus, Elora, and Guelph, and you know, potentially additional Ridewell service to Elmira and Breslau. So higher ridership potential is the benefit, but also comes with a higher cost. And again, these are things that we're going to work out. And finally, the third concept builds on option 2, but looks at some potential to sort of extend earlier in the morning or later into the evening to accommodate other types of trips, maybe people that are working late or start work early, but recognizing that these can be lower ridership demand periods, potentially providing less vehicles during those times with a more flexible on-demand service to sort of reduce your financial impact. So we would look at that. The benefits are sort of more cost-effective during these lower demand times of day, adds a little bit more complexity to the service as well. So those are the 3 concepts that we're going to look at. And we're going to evaluate these concepts based on sort of 4 broad criteria. Social would be one of them. So looking at equity, sort of the passenger experience, access to urban area destinations, access for rural residents, from a technical perspective or an operational, so the reliability of the service, the ability to expand into the future, overall travel times, integration with other services, et cetera. Environmental, are we sort of right-sizing that service to sort of minimize GHG reductions, and also for that financial sustainability of the service as well, aligned with land use and sort of where you're growing and where you're seeing higher density, and financial in terms of initial costs, capital, operating costs, ability to tap into funding as well. So those are the things that we're going to look at in terms of the overall evaluation. In terms of our next step, sort of building on those sort of 3 concepts, we'll develop those detailed design of those options. So sort of identify in terms of routes, services, operating costs, service hours, get a little bit more detailed into what we anticipate the ridership was going to be. We'll confirm that evaluation criteria and evaluate the 3 options based on that criteria. develop that financial assessment, looking at that preferred model and an implementation plan, and of course head back into the public to sort of engage and make sure that we've got that preferred option correct. So with that, I want to thank you for your time today, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dennis. Comments, questions, Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. I'm excited. I can't wait to see where this goes. And while I appreciate the effort to include Breslau and Elmira, I would hope that before we do that, we look at Bellwood and Salem and Alma, places like that. And I'm also curious, not directing, just curious about when you're envisioning the connection to the on-demand services. I think one of the things we hear the most is how to get to Toronto. So we know that we need to get to the GO station. So are we envisioning running a system that would allow the OD or the on-demand services to line up with the system that we're planning? And I'm sure that I'm just confirming that you're already planning that, so that they can come from Bellwood or elsewhere, get on to our bus system and find their way to the GO station. So is that all part of the plan going forward?
Through the mayor, it certainly is looking at opportunities for integration with the Ridewell service and how it connects to any sort of fixed route options that go into Guelph is certainly something that we look at. We sort of look at on demand as operating fairly well in rural areas because it's very difficult to operate a fixed route when the population is so sort of sparse. So that on demand gets you to that fixed route for that longer distance trip into the GO. So that's something that we're certainly going to look at.
Respect, through you, sir. Does that mean that the on-demand is going to continue to be one rider at a time, or are we able to organize, say, to Bellwood, have 6 of you who want to get to the GO station?
Through the mayor, currently the on-demand is always a shared ride model. And so the ability to do that is based on how many people book rides in that sort of similar operating window and are going to the same destination.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. The Ridewell program right now is county-based, correct? So I think county is going to have to be a part of this discussion if we decide to go down that path, correct? Breslau, did Breslau come up because people want to get to the airport? Because there's only homes in Breslau. I've been there several times, so I'm thinking they want to get to the airport.
Through the mayor, Breslau didn't come up specifically. It's just sort of that logical connection to the Grand River Transit System, which is operated by the region of Waterloo, that gets you into the rest of the region. So the airport certainly could be a potential connection, but what we're trying to do is sort of minimize that travel time between the township, the county, and the region, and connect into sort of a logical point that makes sense into the region and explore that option.
Okay, and just one more. We had a school bus, a yellow school bus. I took it for many years to go to the University of Guelph for work, and it picked up at the post office, several stops in Elora, Fergus, on to Guelph. Did you use any of the data from that? Because it was well used. It was a full bus every day, $5 there, $5 home.
Through the mayor, we are familiar with that service that used to operate, but unfortunately we're not able to get any specific ridership data from it. But we are anecdotally familiar with how well it was used and what the purpose was.
Okay, you can reach out to Elliott Bus Lines. They probably have some data for you. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, and thank you, Dennis, for the presentation. It's all very exciting, and I can't wait to see the next steps. I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what the community engagement will look like for phase 2 of the public engagement. Just kind of, are you going back to the high school? Are you just doing more open houses, or what kind of activities will be happening in this next phase? Thank you.
Yeah, through the mayor, we're focused on doing a sort of a public open house activity with sort of a survey to ask questions about what you think. So if you're not able to attend, we'll have some sort of feedback that can be given from members of the community. And that's where we're at this point in time.
Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Mine's just a question for clarification. When you were talking about expanding the shuttle bus service out, you had said 5 days a week, like expand it to 5 days a week. And then on the screen, it said like an all week service. So I'm just wondering, is the all week, like, are you considering just running Monday to Friday for the shuttle, or are we still keeping it for like the tourism and the parking aspects as well?
Through the mayor, that's something that we're looking at. Definitely, we want to keep it during the tourism seasons on weekends as well. So the question would be, do we keep that during the off tourism season to operate on the weekend? So traditionally, of communities this size, some of them run weekend service, some of them don't. So we want to sort of look at that potential demand. But certainly during peak tourist season, we think it makes sense to keep that operating on the weekend as well. So it's just a question about off season.
Councillor Evoy.
Thank you. Through you, sir. I'm curious around costs and what we're looking at. I'm sure you can't give us a cost at this time, and I'm not expecting you to. But is there a shared element of cost with regards to grants, province? I'm looking at our directors who are staff who are still saying yes. Any kind of good news on there would be great for our anyone listening as well.
Through the mayor, certainly there's some funding available through the Ontario Transit Investment Fund, which the County of Wellington, along with the counties of Grey, Bruce, and Dufferin, are currently working on a study which we are involved in that will look at that sort of potential continuation of the GHOST service and potential expansion of it. So that might be something that could come through that fund, as well as potential expansion of the provincial gas tax program. So as ridership goes up, then there's potential to tap into a larger share of that gas tax program, which the county currently uses for its ride-well service. And my apologies, development charges is also potential to accommodate for any expansion vehicles and infrastructure.
Okay, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. Dennis, I'm curious, so with your community engagement, were you hearing the same things like in the high schools with the youth as you were elsewhere in the community, kind of the same kind of themes, or were you hearing kind of different conversations?
Through the mayor, obviously the conversations were always different with the youth. I wasn't there for that one, my colleague Jacob was, but what he had reported he'd heard was just a sort of a general desire to sort of engage more in the community. And we sort of, engage them in sort of fun activities that allow them to sort of identify where they live and where they want to go and how they could engage better in the community. At other venues, like the opinions are very different from depending on who wants to use it. So workers will have one opinion, seniors will have another, but just that general desire for use.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Dennis? Thank you, Dennis, for your presentation. We're looking forward to the next portion of this, and we're all very excited about it because we know that it's a very important initiative for our community. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go down to item 8.2, 2025 Water and Wastewater Rate Study of Financial Plans. Oh, yes, I got ahead of myself there. Recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington receive for information a progress report on the transit feasibility study. Councillor Evoy, Councillor Wilton, all those in favor? So moved. Okay, now we'll do 8.2. And Dan, are you going to speak to this? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. We have Daryl Abbs here today from Watson & Associates Economists Limited. He's a managing partner. We've been working with Daryl and his team over the last number of months to complete the water and wastewater rate study and financial plans. We've been doing these for quite some time now. The township has been looking at full cost recovery rates since the early 2000s. And you can see from the rate projections, we're in fairly good shape when it comes to increases in water and wastewater moving forward. The rate study itself is tied to both our asset management plan and future projections of operating costs. And then the financial plans themselves are a requirement for our drinking water license. So we do them every 5 years. So with that, Daryl is here to do a presentation for us.
Welcome, Daryl.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and thank you very much for that introduction, Dan. Pleasure to be here and here tonight to speak on the water and wastewater rate study and financial plan work that we've been undertaking with the township. Perfect. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about why municipalities undertake these rate study analyses. As Dan alluded to, there's a requirement to undertake the financial plans for your water license. But in addition, there's some positives and benefits to undertaking these studies on a periodic basis to ensure the financial health of your system is in good shape. As it is. And then we'll talk a little bit about the inputs into the calculations. So what are the current rates? What's your rate structure? So how are customers billed? How many customers do you currently have? And how is that going to change over the 10-year period? What are the capital costs that are required based on the asset management plan, the capital budget and forecast, and some of the work we've been doing on the ongoing development charge background study process? What are the proposed rates and recommendations in light of this analysis? And then summarize the financial plans, and then happy to answer any questions at the end. So in general, the intent of looking at the water and wastewater rate analysis, and it's almost like a long-term financial plan for your water and your wastewater systems. The intent is to look out past the current budget year to see what are the ongoing costs that we see, what are the ongoing revenues that we might be able to receive, and are there any potential shocks to the rate that we might foresee and we can start to plan for, so that we can have smooth rate increases if required over the forecast period, rather than having your rates jump up and down in any given year. And so what we do is we start off with all the existing information. How many customers do you have? What are those billable volumes? How much money do you have in the reserves and reserve funds to pay for some of the capital needs? And then if we take a look and look at the asset management plan, the capital plans, et cetera, how are we going to fund these capital projects over the next 10-year period, and then potentially beyond? As part of this as well, we took a look at the existing rate structure that you have. We took a look at some of the capital connection and frontage charges you have. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's some additional area-specific rates for wastewater that are imposed. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And at the end, there's recommended rates for 2026. And then the rate study does forecast those rate projections for the next 10 years that you'll consider on an annual basis through the budget process. So as Dan mentioned, you have been utilizing full cost recovery methodology in calculating your water and wastewater rate needs for a long time now. And when we get to the rate analysis, you can see how that's borne out in the rate calculations. But really, in light of the Walkerton crisis, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, where people did get sick and some people did pass away as a result of the E. coli that got into the water system, there's some legislative changes that occurred in light of that. And, there's some various pieces of legislation. Some are implemented, some are partially implemented, awaiting regulations. But ultimately, all of these pieces of legislation have that same principle of full cost recovery. In addition to the water and wastewater specific legislation is the Municipal Infrastructure Strategy and the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. I wish the names were a bit shorter, a little bit easier to say. But that brought in the requirement for asset management planning. And as you've been working on your asset management plans and implementing them, as part of that, you need to have a financial strategy on how you're going to pay for and replace and maintain the systems. And so all of that needs to be incorporated into that principle of full cost recovery when we're determining what the rates need to be. So, and I apologize, it's a little bit small on the screen, but for the current rate structure that you have is the most common rate structure that we see across Ontario. And it's some sort of a fixed monthly, bi-monthly, a quarterly charge. In your case, it's a monthly based charge. And in addition to that, a charge based on how much water you consume. And so for the monthly based charges, for example, in the 3/4 or less category, that's where most of the residential users would be. It's $12.14 per month. And then on top of that, you'd be billed a $2.56 per cubic meter that you would consume. In addition to the water-specific charges, we do have a sprinkler system charges, these additional charges for those properties that have sprinkler systems that require some additional capacity in the system. And then on the wastewater side of things, we have a similar rate structure for most of the communities. But in the Salem area, we do have, because it's only serviced with wastewater, there is no water meter to provide a volume charge. There is fixed charges. And so fixed charges for the single residential units, the multiple residential units, the public school, and then we'll talk a little bit about those special properties there that have an additional charge for wastewater. Okay. So when we're looking at the analysis, the starting point is how many customers do you currently have? All right. And if we take a look, we have 8,581 water customers, 8,753 wastewater customers, right? And you have more wastewater because you do have the Salem area that is serviced with wastewater and not water. So that's our starting point. And then what we do is we want to say, well, how is that going to change over the forecast period? When we do the rate calculations, it's going to be what are the costs divided by the volumes or how many users we have. And so if that changes, the number of users change, the denominator changes, and it's going to change the rate calculations and what we need. So what we did is we are currently working on the development charge background study. And as part of that work, we need to prepare a growth forecast that aligns with your 10-year and longer-term growth plan. And so we do have some growth figures here. So what we're looking at is going from about 8,700 customers at the end of 2025 for water, going up to 11,000, just under 350 customers there. The volumes are going from about 1.8 million cubic meters up to about 2.2 million cubic meters by the end of the 10-year forecast. On the wastewater side of things, very similar numbers. We're looking at going from about 8,576 customers up to 11,211, and a similar increase in the billable volumes for wastewater. So we know that we're going to grow the number of customers, but what are the capital needs that we have as the township? And so what we did is we took a look at the 2025 capital budget and forecast. We took a look at the asset management plan needs, and then worked with township staff as we're developing the development charge capital program to determine what some of the growth related needs are going to be as well. Okay, and so what we can do is we can summarize those needs here for water and wastewater. And so for water, the needs over the next 10 years, about $122 million. But you can see about $94.5 million is growth related. So would be funded with development charges or with debt, which would then be funded with development charges. That leaves about $24 million in non-growth related capital expenditures, about $3.7 million that's specifically life cycle replacement and saving for life cycle, which I'll talk a little bit about, and then some studies as well. On the wastewater side of things, we're looking at just under $47.9 million in capital needs. About $27.9 million of that is growth related. So again, funded with development charges, with about $13.5 million in the non-growth related capital expenditures, about $6 million for life cycle needs, and about $300,000 for studies. So as part of this, there's in the rate study report at the very back, there's lots of spreadsheets. Lots of fun numbers in case you want to dig into the details. But as we build out this capital forecast, we need to identify how we're going to fund those capital costs. So we can utilize your existing reserves or reserve funds. We can issue debt to pay for some of these projects. We can use operating budget transfers, which means as part of the rates, the revenue that we're going to collect, we're going to put it into the bank accounts to build them up to pay for the capital needs. There could be grants, and we have assumed some grant funding. Development charges, and then as well, and the last one actually should have been a check mark, is the Part 12 capital charges, which you do actually have those connection charges that we'll talk about, and those frontage charges we'll talk about. So the starting point of the reserves is how much money do we have in the bank account to start to pay for some of those capital needs. And so if we take a look at the water general capital reserve, just over 6.6 million. For the development charge reserve, just under $6 million for water. For wastewater, we have about 11.5 million in the general capital reserve, with about 4.8 million in the development charge reserve fund for wastewater. And then we have just under 2 million for some vehicle replacement, equipment replacement specific reserves. And so to put that into context, when we talk about the total dollar value here, this looks like a lot, but when we talk about your asset management plan and what the value is of the assets that you own, you'll see that it is quite significant. And so to break down what's included in the rate study analysis and how we're going to fund the 122 million for water, we've broken this down into a lot more detail. So 1.8 million would be from grants, provincial or federal. We do have some local service funding. So this is as part of the development charge background study. There's a local service policy, and the local service policy says the developers will pay for a certain amount of infrastructure, and then anything above that will include in the development charges. So the local service funding is the amount that the developers will need to contribute or construct as part of their developments. So that's 15.8 million. Then we have about 25 million from the development charge reserve fund. And then you'll see about $45.7 million in growth related debentures. So we need to issue debt in that amount and then fund that debt with development charge revenues. You'll notice we didn't identify any non-growth related debenture requirements. Again, that just goes to speak to the fact that you've been utilizing full cost pricing. You've been incorporating reserve fund transfers and building up those reserves. And as we will show as part of this rate analysis, that you've been able to maintain some nominal increases over the forecast period without having to issue significant debt. Okay, and then there's some additional contributions. You'll see about 30 million comes from the water reserve. And then on the wastewater side, you'll see similar numbers. You'll see about 17.7 million comes from the wastewater reserve. Okay, so you'll know that the water reserve number and the wastewater reserve number obviously are higher than what you currently have. So we need to build those reserves up over time so we can pay for that infrastructure that's needed. As I mentioned, try to put the existing reserve fund balances into context. The total value of assets on your water system is about 137, almost 138 million dollars. On the wastewater side, it's about 178.5 million dollars, right? And so what that translates to, if we're going to be, as part of the asset management plan says, you either need to spend or save about $3.5 million for water every year or $3.85 million for wastewater every year to maintain that system, either putting money aside so that you can replace the assets when they need it or actually replacing the assets over the forecast period. So we've included these reserve contributions in those amounts to ensure that we're aligned with the asset management plan. With respect to the operating budgets, our starting point is your current operating budget. And then typically we're going to add inflation as costs will change over time. 2% generally for most things, 5% for utilities, fuels, chemicals, and things like that. They tend to increase at a faster rate. But in addition, and with given the amount of capital needs in the forecast, we also took a look at there'd be additional staffing needs to operate some of these new infrastructure, and then some additional operating costs related to the new wells. So not just using inflation, but also stepping up those costs, as we know the operating costs will increase with the new capital projects. So in putting this in context, if we take a look at the operating costs and the capital related costs, which are your what we're transferring into the reserve to pay for those capital projects. We're going from about $7.5 million today up to about $14.4 million by the end of the 10-year period. So significant increase in your expenditures. And you can see actually, when we look at the graph, the capital component of those costs are increasing over time, right? And we see that with a large capital program there. On the wastewater side of things, the operating costs are increasing and the capital costs are increasing around the same rate, going from about 9 million up to just over just under $11.2 million by the end of the forecast period. So what does it all mean if we put all that information together? So if we take, again, apologies for the small table here, but what that means is what we forecasted is rate increases on the water side of 3% annually, and wastewater would be 2% annually. So on average, about 2.4, 2.5% rate increases per year, which is right around inflation is what inflation is right now. And that would be for the general rates. For the Salem specific wastewater rates, what we did was we took a look at trying to increase those at the same rate as the general rate, so 2% per year for those wastewater rates. One of the things we did is we took a look at the charge that is imposed on the Salem Public School. And because they're not metered, and we've had a flat charge that's been inflated over time, what we did was we wanted to take a look at what does a typical school usage look like, so that we could try to right-size the rate relative to what the residential customers are paying. And so based on what the volumes were used in other schools, what we calculated was actually a decrease of the current rate of about $16,834 down to about $7,400 for next year. So decreasing that rate for the public school. And then from there on, the rate would increase at 2% per year, similar to the other wastewater rates. In addition to those Salem-specific wastewater rates, there's also a few properties on Bridge Street that incur an extra fee, as there is some additional costs related to providing them with service. And so that charge for next year would go from $400 to $588 per customer annually. And then that would increase at 2% per year, similar to the other wastewater rates. Lastly, for the special charges, we have capital connection charges and frontage charges. And so capital connection charges, you can think of them as development charges for the existing homeowners that want to connect to the system. So if you have an existing home and you're not connected to the water or the wastewater system and you want to connect to the system, municipalities have the ability to impose these capital charges to recover the cost of the infrastructure required to service them. And so one of the recommendations as part of our report is to incentivize customers that are on private systems to connect to the municipal system, is to actually remove that connection charge. So we can try to get some of those people onto the municipal system and remove that cost impediment. In terms of, would be some that have paid that charge maybe in the last year. So council can consider potentially refunding those that have paid maybe in the last 12 months or so to align with this new approach. With respect to frontage charges are imposed to recover the construction costs that have already been incurred for some of the linear pipes in front of some houses. And so because those are costs that have already been incurred, we recommend to continue to impose those frontage charges. So remove the capital connection charge, but keep the frontage charges. So when we put all that together for a typical residential user, if we look at the water and the wastewater bills based on an average of 158 cubic meters a year, which when we looked at some historical numbers, that's kind of the average residential customer uses. The bill today would be about $1,212, and it would go up to $1,241 or $1,242 next year. So an increase of $30 or about $2.50 per month for next year. And then you can see the continued 2.4% increase for the combined water and wastewater bill. So how does that rank in the relative terms to some of your neighboring municipalities and some of the municipalities in the area? You can see the relative position of the municipality doesn't change, and you're kind of in that lower middle area for a typical residential user. Keeping in mind that all the other rates for these municipalities, most of them are their current rates. Only some of them are proposed. They are also going through the same process in updating their rates through the budget process for next year. All right. So that's all the information in the rate study. And then what we needed to do as part of your licensing requirement is to prepare the water and wastewater financial plans. And so really what we do is we take the information from the rate study and we have to look at it in a different basis and essentially take our modified cash basis or our cash flow analysis and translate it to a forward-looking financial statements. So taking that and translating it into accounting terms. And so you can see through the various components of the analysis we have to identify the capital costs in the rate study, and we look at the capital forecast, the timing, and what the costs are in each year. For the financial plan, we have to look at how your tangible capital assets change with the addition of those new capital projects. And similarly, for some of the different components, we just need to treat them a little bit differently and look at them to prepare those forward-looking financial plans. Yeah, but it's all the same information from the rate study translated into accounting terms is essentially how I like to summarize it. So with that concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell, for that presentation. Comments, questions? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, and thank you for the presentation. Just had a question when you're saying the recommendation number 8, I guess it is, that if you're going to connect to township services, you'd have to connect to both water and wastewater, unless there's a specific exception made by the Director of Infrastructure. So I'm just curious if you can say a little bit more about why that is, because I know there's a big neighborhood over in my ward that could connect, but nobody wants to, because we like our well water. So most people would be happy to connect sewage, but not water. So I'm just curious what all the reasoning is. I'm assuming it's financial because of the metering, but if you can say a little bit more about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Should I pass it over to staff maybe to address that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question and through the mayor. So yeah, that's the wastewater side is not metered. So really we use the water meter data to generate the wastewater charge. So ideally, when someone comes to us with a request to connect, water for sure, because we can get the metered, and then also wastewater is the preference. It's in our bylaw currently. There's the odd exception out there like Salem and all our kind of where we have the grinder pump system in Salem. Like there's definitely those are exceptions to the rules. But yeah, no, definitely the preference is to have both unless there's some sort of exceptional circumstance.
To follow up on that, then with the number 6, that council consider maintaining the water and wastewater frontage charges, but the other one was removing the connection charges. So on average, is that like which one's the more expensive? Like what does that mean for an actual homeowner in terms of price?
For sure. Great question. And through the mayor. So yeah, typically frontage is the more expensive one. It's calculated on a meter of frontage along the main, which is typically the frontage of your property along the road. We're just looking at ways, like typically, like we've never done a mandatory connection in the township, at least since I've been here, and I don't think in the last 20 or so years there's been no mandatory connection. So it's just really just looking at ways to encourage, like through our reconstruction projects, like we're dropping constructing services to the property line when we go in front of properties that are on well and septic. Looking at ways that we might get more customers as a result, make use of those. There's significant kind of capital expense in the ground with not being connected. So just looking at ways to encourage connections. Yeah.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters, I appreciate you bringing up the Bridge Street properties. Did we look at 1% annual increase? Because the increase from 400 to 588 is quite significant for those residents. I also want to bring up Stump Street, Mar, that water treatment up there. I don't see them in here.
Thanks for the question, Councillor McDonald, and through the mayor. So, so Stump Street, Mar, that there's a groundwater collection system there. So where the residents do pay a fee, kind of I think it's added to their tax bill. So yeah, that was kind of outside of this this study. That fee, it's kind of calculated very similar. It's like a life cycle calculation. That basically we're collecting funding to kind of replace that system at the end of its life. And so, but that's a separate process. That's a groundwater collection system. Yep.
And through the mayor, so on the first question about the cost increase, and so what we did was we took a look at the actual costs, the operating costs related to the activities specific for those properties, divided by those number of properties to come up with what the cost is. And so that is reflective of the current actual cost of the operating those pumps for the specific properties.
So I see you're doing 2%, but I'm asking for 1%, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. Sorry, can you just clarify again? So the water rates are going up an average of 2% as well as the sprinkler rates were at 3% as well. Is it like, can you just kind of talk about the sprinkler rates? Is it like 3 plus 3 or just the 3%?
Yeah, so through the mayor, it's just 3%, 3% per year. Yeah. So the general water rates are going up by 3% per year. The sprinkler rates would be going up 3% per year. So overall, the bill would go up 3% for the water. Yeah.
And just to kind of follow up on that, is that what you're seeing typically kind of like in other municipalities where like the rates for your general water is going up the same as like sprinkler? I'm just thinking like the water you need, it's more of an essential versus a sprinkler that could be a little bit more cosmetic. I don't know. Yeah.
So through the mayor, with the water wastewater rate studies that I've worked on, there's not too many that separate and have these additional separate charges. But actually, overall, what we're seeing is just generally the water and wastewater rates are increasing at a much higher rate than 3% generally. And that kind of goes back to the beginning of the presentation that you're in a good spot financially. We're seeing annual rate increases for like water and wastewater of like 8%, 10% in a number of communities. Because they might not have been utilizing that full cost recovery method, incorporating the asset management needs historically. So, you're kind of in a good spot.
Thank you. Through you. This one may be for staff, and I may know the answer, but I'm going to ask it again. So through the Housing Enabling Water System Fund, we got the $6.something million there. And on the 10-year capital forecast, all of the Guelph Street water, wastewater capital is showing at 2034. We do anticipate with the development, though, that will be brought up, right? Or is that date kind of our expected date?
Yeah, through the mayor. So yeah, no, definitely. Those projects were in the process of getting a service financing agreement for the kind of the balance of that cost, and then design, and then looking at construction kind of starting in 27. So so we'll be recalibrating timelines very soon.
Any other comments or questions for Daryl? Yes, Dennis.
Thank you, and through you, and maybe for staff, but thank you, Daryl. Just curious about transparency tools when it comes to the increases and for the residents I'm assuming it'll be on the bill, but will there be a breakdown just kind of going over where these increases are coming from?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. We typically relay this information once endorsed, typically through our fees and charges updates. We put the annual rate increases in for the purposes of water and wastewater funding. And then we then relay that to Center Wellington Hydro, who administers our water and wastewater billing on our behalf. So it's through that communication tool that gets relayed on an annual basis. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions for Daryl? I'll make a few comments. The numbers are large and are concerning, and you're always concerned about whether growth pays for growth. That's always a comment, and also province or provincial participation. That also concerning given sort of the climate of the day, So I know we sort of have to take our best guess at all this kind of stuff, but I just want to put that out there that the province is going to need to continue to participate to make these things sort of work the way they probably should work. But anyways, I won't go there for now. But anyways, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions for Daryl, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.
I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington approve the 2025 water and wastewater rate study prepared by Watson and Associates Economists Limited, and that the proposed water and wastewater rates be incorporated into future draft budgets for consideration, and that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington approve the 2025 water and wastewater financial plans prepared by Watson and Associate Economists Limited, and that the water and wastewater financial plans be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Do you have a mover for that? Councillor McDonald, seconder on that. Councillor Craddock. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment that when it goes forward, we look at the rates of 1% to be incorporated.
That's not a friendly amendment.
No. Yes, make it. Yeah.
You presented it as 2%. I'm just asking it for it to be presented as 1% when we actually go through the budget.
Comment, Ms. Wilson?
Through the mayor, the rate study is indicating what the recommended rates should be based on our full cost recovery method. If council wants to consider alternate rates, that would be part of the budget process and not part of this report.
And obviously an opportunity to bring that forward when that time comes. So, okay, so we had a mover and a seconder. Yes. Sorry.
I did.
Would you be willing to?
Yeah, I'm willing to, just as long as it's clear, we're going to discuss it in the budget process.
Yep.
Okay, because we're actually stamping it now, right?
We'll have opportunity to have further discussion if we wouldn't step that back, and we'd bring it back forward for discussion at budget.
Fair enough.
Okay.
That's great.
Perfect. Okay, so now we have a mover and a seconder. Okay, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Okay. We'll move down to item 8.3, community engagement, charter and strategy. Hello, Kendra.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor Waters and members of council. Tonight I'm here with our consultant Tanis from Topin Consulting to share with you the draft engagement charter and strategy. It outlines our commitment, responsibilities, and core principles of engagement between the township, council, and residents, and the consistent, proactive, inclusive, and meaningful way the township will engage with our community. As we move forward, our goal is to advance, evaluate, and strengthen our engagement practices, ensuring that Centre Wellington remains a place where open dialogue and respectful participation leads to informed, community-driven outcomes. So tonight we'll do just a quick presentation here. And I think Tanis is going to move the slides for me. So how we define community engagement. So community engagement is the practice of working with our community in meaningful, inclusive ways to shape important township decisions, actions, and change. So what we've put in the report tonight is the draft charter and strategy. And so the charter outlines the vision, the influence, and the responsibilities that we all have in this journey of engagement. The strategy has the goals, the principles, the measures, and the frameworks. And then in early 2026, we'll be coming out with the toolkit, and that will show the process, questions, and resources that we all will have in order to move engagement forward with our community. I'll pass it over to Tanis now.
Thanks, Kendra, and thanks so much. It's an honor to be here tonight to present the work to date. And in addition to the charter, the strategy, and the toolkit that Kendra has mentioned, there will also be an action plan that charts the roadmap ahead in terms of some of the short-term, medium-term, and longer-term tasks to undertake. We wanted to just share with you some highlights of our thought process in developing the charter and the strategy that you have to read in front of you. And it's been informed by 3 significant pieces of information. That includes engagement with community and staff and input from them. It includes international best practice standards of engagement from the International Association of Public Participation, and it also includes research that we've conducted across municipalities in Canada to learn from them. The What We Heard report that's in your council package provides a summary of that input that we received from public and staff. So that first category of information. I'm not going to go through what we heard in detail, but I am going to highlight a couple of important things that we heard just to help to make visible our thinking in developing the charter and strategy. That is something when we engaged with community that is missing currently in your practice right now. So we just wanted to show some of the links between what we heard and how we have used that input. And then you will also see in the charter and strategy that some of the other elements in there have been taken from international best practices and standards. We engaged with folks between June and September of this year, and over that time we connected with 530 people through 39 different community events and spaces. One of our goals was to reach new people beyond those who we usually hear from in engagement when the township goes out, and we were able to connect with over 30% had never engaged with the township before, and almost 60% had never heard of Connect CW. So that one measure was successful from our process. But the other important thing is we measured success of the process beyond just numbers as well. And I know that's often a question that gets asked is, were we successful in engagement? And it goes beyond just the number of people that we reached. And so we had some measures for what made this process meaningful, and we evaluated those from participants themselves to hear what they said. And those results can be found in the What We Heard report. This measures the quality of the engagement process. In the What We Heard report, you'll see that we ask people what's working well when it comes to engagement, what's not, and what are their ideas for improvement. I want to just highlight a couple of things that people had mentioned frequently in terms of why they may not be engaging. Because sometimes when people don't participate, we make some assumptions like they don't care, or they're not interested, or it doesn't matter, or maybe they're busy. But there's a few other reasons that came up. So definitely access came up. But another one that came up also was just not being aware of the opportunities. And a significant one also was that people just don't believe that their influence and their input and feedback will make a difference. It's important to highlight these, I think. There was also some other barriers that they mentioned as well that you'll find in the report, but these are some of the key problems we're trying to solve for in improving engagement in the future. And I think it's important to understand what's preventing people from engaging, because as you can see, providing opportunities for people to access the process is going to look very different than the things we're going to have to do to have people believe that their participation will in fact make a difference. So to make visual some of our thinking, what we heard, we asked the community about what makes engagement meaningful and effective for you. Those are the things you see on the left-hand side. So things like clear process, early engagement and ongoing, that it's inclusive and accessible, it's respectful, that we're accountable in our promises and our commitments and following up, that there's a variety of different ways to participate and to engage, and that there is follow-up and there's a closing of the loop so we know what happened with our input. These were used to create in the charter and strategy 7 guiding principles for the practice of engagement at the township. And they all reflect what we heard here about what makes engagement meaningful and effective for your community. And these principles of what makes engagement meaningful and effective also directly reflected what people said needed to be improved as well. So you'll see in the strategy, there's 7 guiding principles, and these kind of roll up to have for 3 key goals that we're trying to achieve when it comes to engagement in the future. But we didn't just stop there. You'll also see that we also included measures of success for each of these goals and each of these principles, so that you can go back and measure how successful you are, in fact, in achieving these standards that community said that they're looking for. And this is, in fact, how you can measure successive engagement going forward in the future. We also asked folks what's their hopes for engagement in the future. What is the best that they would like to see? And we use that to create a vision statement for Centre Wellington when it comes to engagement as a vision to strive and work towards in the future. So that hopefully everyone will be able to say that Centre Wellington is a community where open dialogue, respectful participation, and inclusive engagement helps to inform local decisions and strengthens the connection between community and local government. There's a few other pieces as well in the strategy and framework that you'll see that are in there that are reflective of best practice. You will see that there is what's called an engagement framework, and this is the standardized, rigorous process to follow that if you do follow that and all of the sub-steps that we've identified for each of these phases, that in fact it will help to lead you towards achieving those guiding principles and those goals that are set out in the strategy. Sorry, I'll go back one second. There was a couple of other things as well. There's a reference to embedding an equity lens in the practice as well. Equity lens is just basically a series of asking the best questions at the right point in time. And we will be embedding these questions in the toolkit that gets developed so that you will have an equity lens in your practice of engagement. You'll also see in the charter and strategy a few other things like when we will consider to engage and when we may not, how community input connects to decision making, the level of influence community might have, and roles and responsibilities of staff, community, and council. And Kendra.
Sure. So our next steps in the process is validation. So it's on Connect CW right now. We're going to encourage members of the community to go on and look at it. We've really made an effort to show people what we heard from those sessions, hoping that they'll go back on and see how their input has played into the draft strategy and charter. We've also reached out to the advisory committees and shared it with them, hoping that they'll take a look at the report and then provide further comments if they have any. We'll review all of the feedback and then come back here on December 15th hopefully for final approval from all of you. And then in early 2026, we'll develop the toolkit, which will advance, evaluate, and strengthen our community engagement.
Okay, comments, questions for Tanis or Kendra? Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, and thank you, Kendra and Tanis. It's a great report and great project, so I really appreciate all the work that you've put into it. I just had a few questions. One was around the advisory committees, actually. There is a comment about that they are a form of engagement. I just had questions about if Tanis maybe had any insights from your experience with the township and meeting everybody on ways that those advisory committees could maybe be used more effectively as an engagement tool. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Great question. And yes, there was some feedback provided when we engaged with advisory committees about how their use could be improved. That was out of scope of this project, but it is going to be one of the recommendations that I will be including in the final report of looking at how our advisory committees used, and you can evaluate success of that based off of the strategy and charter that you've got here to do that kind of evaluation and comparison.
Great, thank you. I'll have more questions, but I'll wait.
Okay. Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. I really appreciate this. I think we can all agree that upping the level of engagement and how we encourage our community to do so is really important. So thank you for this. I'm a little bit curious about the follow-up piece. I recognize its value so much. It's one thing to invite people to speak, and it's a whole other thing to let them know we heard them. And so, Tanis, I do look forward to hearing some of those solutions as we go forward in the deeper of the report. But with regards to follow-up, are we looking at then, because we seem to always be going from one, let's call it survey for a blanket word, to another without really spending that time with follow-up, how is that going to affect our staff team, and what are we looking at in our, with all of this, are you thinking that you're going to have to increase the current complement?
I think it's something that we definitely have to look at because, as we know, it's just Hannah and I. But I think in the meantime, when we start looking at some of these things, it's going to be something that I make sure is part of our request for proposal. So when we do hire on consultants, we'll have to make sure that there's that what we heard. A lot of times they'll do a lot of consultation for us, but then it doesn't get brought back. And so I think we can all just do a better job of that as well and making sure that we hear back from them and getting that feedback too.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you. It's a fairly specific question, but in the guiding principle for evaluate, and they have measures of success to evaluate, have the community is included in evaluating success. And I'm just kind of curious what that looks like in practice. Thank you.
It can look like a lot of different things, but bare minimum, very simply, kind of the base level is asking participants themselves how effective we were in achieving some of those principles. So like, to be really tangible as an example, the exit surveys that we did for this project at the end of every event, we asked participants to give us their feedback about the effectiveness of the process. So that, I would say, is a bare minimum that will be embedded in the framework and the toolkit as a base level. But then you can do evaluation in all kinds of other different ways as well. And you can do it in a collaborative way. And you can do it in a deeper way if the project is, depending on the scope and the size and scale of the project. And if it's, for example, ongoing for a number of years or has other phases that are coming up and you really want to make sure you continue to get it right, you can do more with evaluation. But I would say that's the base minimum that we're going to expect from all projects.
Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, through you. Thanks, Tanis. I mean, this was a long development project, and thank you to Kendra here because it was a lot of coordination with you. We did hear a lot about our committees, our advisory committees, including the legislative one. Your takeaway from all of it, do we have too many committees? Not enough? I feel like we have too many. That's taking up too much staff time, and they're not really working the greatest. So I'd just like your take on that.
So I didn't have that lens when I was getting feedback from advisory committees, and I wasn't asking those kinds of questions in their responses, though they were giving some reference to their experience as being engaged with the township through as a member of the advisory committees. And I would say that what I heard would be very reflective of what we heard generally from community about how is our input being used? Is this a good thing? I've been there asking the question about, is this a good use of our time? There was some, I did hear, so now I'm just saying this anecdotally off of like just little snippets of things that I'm remembering from the conversations about people feeling like they didn't have a whole lot of time to really sit with, sometimes really complex issues. They're given a report or presented a report, like say right now, and then they have to respond immediately to it. And so having some of that time to really understand some of this, feeling like they are just a part of like a checklist kind of part of the process. So I think to answer your question again, in the future tasks that I might suggest would be to do a bit more of a deeper review with that specific lens of how effective are our advisory committees. Your question about, is there too many? I think it comes back to the effectiveness of them and what's the purpose and how are we using their input and how is it being considered. One of the biggest things I find with advisory committees is the misalignment in expectations of members with how their input and feedback is actually used. Often members have a higher expectation that their advising and giving advice to and providing direction, whereas often in reality, that level of influence is much lower.
Just to add to that as well is we can always work with our legislative services as well once we get this toolkit, and once it comes closer to an end of the advisory committees, to go through a thorough, like, not exit strategy, but almost like, you know, speak with them and give them, you know, get some insight from them before those committees are over as well.
Councillor Wilton.
Sorry, Tanis, I'll start again. So it might be more of a staffing question. I'm just looking at the guiding principle about resource commitment, and that sufficient staff, time, and budget are allocated for engagement across the organization. And I'm curious if the model is thinking that there'll be an engagement kind of unit like we currently have with you and Hannah, or will there be a little bit of train the trainers and get all kind of units across the organization having some capacity to do engagement a little bit more effectively, and I'm just a little bit worried maybe we don't have enough resources if we continue with the current model, that with only 2 people to support all the engagement that needs to happen to kind of meet these objectives. So just if you comment a little bit on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
So I think what's going to be important is for us to get the toolkits and all of that, and get, you know, acquainted with what are our next steps in this. We've had an amazing working group. You know, we've had somebody from each department, so Adam and Kristen and Carrie, and a number of other people, that it's really great to now see, like, the shift of where people would just come to communications and, you know, expect us to push out. Now they're realizing that, you know, that they can participate, and then all of the work that's in that, and to maybe come, like, with, you know, information. And they've been great advocates across the corporation. And then through this whole strategy and charter, we worked with interdepartmental and staff, and we went right down to customer service associates to see, you know, what are their thoughts about engagement. So I think it's next year will be a really good year to evaluate, see the toolkits, what we can do, and then we'll assess that probably in the 2027 staffing strategy.
Thank you.
Any other further comments or a question for Tanis and Kendra? Thank you for speaking off the top of your head, Tanis, on that one item. I've seen it, in fact, that sometimes we bring things to these committees, and you're right, they are fairly complicated, and the expectation is them to hear the presentation and make comments on right away. I don't know in terms of our process how that works, and that may be something we have to do a deeper dive in terms of how we roll that out. But I've seen that on a number of times, and obviously part of the reasons for the committee is for their expertise and understanding of some of these things, and for them to have legitimate input. I think that's something we need to figure out, and I think that's a very valid point. Anyways, that is something that we'll have to figure out as a staff and as a council as we move forward. Anyways, appreciate that input. Okay, so I'm going to read the recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington receive report CAO 2025-22 Community Engagement Charter and Strategy for Information, and that the Council directs staff to receive community feedback on the draft strategy through Connect CW and return to Council at the December 15, 2025 meeting with the final report for Council's consideration. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Evoy. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Thank you, Kendra, and thank you, Tanis. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move down to item 8.4, 2026 draft budget depth requirements and capacity. And I see Adam moving to the lectern.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. And through you, this report is intended to seek council endorsement to include the attached debt requirements and capacity details into the 2026 draft budget. As can be seen in the detailed calculations, staff have completed or contemplated and included the anticipated debt requirements and servicing costs through the 2036 timeframe. The township remains compliant with both legislated annual repayment limits and our self-imposed ceiling of 15% stipulated and endorsed through our asset management plan. Worth noting, however, is that through a multitude of long-range planning documents completed in 2025, we've identified several large-scale projects that have introduced significant pressure on our debt-supported growth needs, which has changed dramatically our debt forecast from prior years. To maintain compliance with the self-imposed debt servicing ceilings, staff have had to assume external funding support to offset growth-related capital costs. Additionally, beyond the 10-year forecast horizon, staff remain acutely aware of other significant capital infrastructure costs that will continue to put significant pressure on our long-term financial planning from a debt perspective. These include, but are not limited to, the Fergus wastewater treatment plant expansion, the additional ice pad of the JECC, and the Middlebrook well site development. With that, staff will continue to monitor and report back to council as more information becomes available. But it is important to note and understand that this is a forecast only at this point, and council and staff have the flexibility to either advance or postpone projects based on prevailing market trends and the annual budget adjustments. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Adam. Comments, questions from council? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. So when we look back at like a report like earlier on our transportation feasibility study, no future transportation costs have been factored into this current forecast at all. Is that correct?
That is correct. As it stands now, there's no transit infrastructure cost being contemplated.
This is just everything approved to this point.
That is correct. We've also got some line of sight from the development of our development charges study that have been layered in just to give some visibility to our long-range planning forecasts. But beyond that, from a transit feasibility standpoint, no, those have not been contemplated.
Councillor Welton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. And just when you said there was assumptions made about receiving grants funding to kind of help support some of the projects, can you say a little bit more about that? Like, have you built in kind of a base assumption for certain projects, or how does that work? Thank you.
Yes, and this is detailed in the draft budget that has just gone out. The major assumptions around that front reside around the multi-use recreational facility, where we would be relying upon external funding to the tune of about $8 million to offset the capital costs associated with that, assuming either grant opportunities or other external funding opportunities as well.
Any other comments, question? Councillor Craddock.
Thank you. And through you, is there any large capital projects that don't have a mechanism in place to defer or pause that we're committed to fully?
Within the confines of the forecast as it sits presently, we have the operations center and a couple of well sites for which we're in the processes of working with Infrastructure Ontario to secure that debt funding. But we don't really see the pressure on our debt capacity limits until we look out in the forecast where we see some of those other large scale capital projects coming online.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments, questions from council? Adam? Okay, I will read the recommendation that the Council Township of Central Wellington approves the inclusion of the 2026 draft budget debt requirements and capacity as outlined in Report Core 2025-67 dated November 24th, 2025 in the 2026 staff draft budget. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Evoy, seconder on that. Councillor Craddock. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is so moved. Thank you, Adam. And he's not leaving, so that's we'll move down to item 8.5, paid parking program update.
Thank you, Mayor Waters, and again through you. The report before council is being presented for informational purposes and has an aim to provide council with an update regarding staff progress on the implementation of a phase 1 paid parking program for the township, with specific focus on the Elora downtown area. Staff are currently targeting a go-live date for the paid parking program for early January 2026. And the program will introduce 2 distinct zones, with Zone 1 being designated as a high turnover zone with parking limited to 3 hours in duration, and a second zone for longer term parking. Parking will cost $3 per hour in both zones with a daily maximum of $15. Additional phase 1 implementation attributes include free resident parking, and this will be enabled through a self-service portal which will open effective tomorrow. There will be an opportunity for non-resident employee parking exemptions for businesses operating within the Elora Central Business District, which will also be available and administered through the self-service portal, again opening tomorrow. From an enforcement standpoint, enforcement will remain largely unchanged except for the expanded enforcement of paid parking infractions effective once the program goes live. And the paid parking system is intended to be entirely cashless and paperless with payment accepted by credit card only. From a communication standpoint, staff are committed to providing a detailed website with all pertinent information, including FAQs. Staff will also provide opportunities for members of the public to drop in for assistance in registering for exemptions and promoting the program through newspaper and radio advertisements. A high-level financial plan is included in the report, and staff will provide updates regarding the program once it's active. And with that, I'm effectively here to answer any questions that council may have relative to the program.
Okay, Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. Thank you. I have some questions. So whilst I saw some information on social media today, or maybe yesterday, I don't remember when I started to see it about this, my concern is more about the clarity or lack thereof, and I'm not sure that this goes directly to you, Adam, but with regards to the resident parking, I seem to have already got the vibe that people think they can parking for free, but that they don't have to move their cars, that they can still, because they're parking for free, that 3-hour limit isn't a part of it. And so I think a couple of things are super important, given that our comms team is right here. I think that is really, really important that we make that clear, because I've already gotten some discussion around that not being so. My other concern is around what's going to happen once this is implemented. So I'm sure we're going to have more concerns. I'm sure we're going to have more in-person, and speaking again to our current staff complement being able to keep up with this, because it's going to increase the amount of people coming in and wanting to speak about it, phone calls and concerns, and people wanting to fight tickets and all the stuff that goes with paid parking. And I'm wondering what our plan is for that. So I guess I should look to you, Dan, about what our plan is around how we're going to not wait until after it becomes a problem to make sure that we're in front of it a little bit for the January rollout.
I can take an initial stab at both of those. From a communication standpoint and the clarity around the resident exemptions, there is wording as part of the exemption process through the portal that speaks to exactly that in terms of the requirement to still maintain adherence to the hourly maximums within both paid parking zones. So as part of that process, that we've tried to highlight that as much as possible, and we will continue to kind of make that clear through future communications as that comes to pass. From a staffing capacity standpoint, through the 2025 budget, there was a licensing coordinator position that was endorsed by council, funded predominantly through kind of the paid parking revenues. So as we ramp this up, we are in the process now of finalizing the details of that, and we expect to hit the market very shortly with that opportunity to kind of augment our staffing to support the increased contact with the public, if you will.
Thank you. With permission through the mayor to follow up. That is really encouraging. Thank you. So I look forward to, that means January, hopefully once it rolls out, that we have someone there. With regards to the handicap piece as well, equal misunderstanding about, because you get 3 hours, that will be clarified for people, that handicap parking is that 3 hours, is that 3 hours without paying. Like, I just think we need to be uber clear, even if it doesn't feel like it's necessary. I think the more clear we are, the better.
Councillor McDonald.
To you, Mayor Waters. I know we decided as a council we wouldn't include Fergus yet. When is Fergus coming on board with this program? Because it seems like there's so much focus on Elora doing this first, and you know, it looks like you've got everything in order for the rollout. I'd just like to know when Fergus is coming on board. I have a difficult time finding parking in Fergus, so hopefully a turnover spots will happen.
Yep. Through the mayor, I think from a staff level, we're interested in getting the phase 1 up and running and getting the kind of the kinks ironed out first. So with that, we haven't got a definitive timeline for which, you know, if and when it comes to pass that Fergus would be included into the paid parking program.
And I guess this would go to Legislative Services for this question. Have we had any comments recently about rolling this out to Carrie?
Through you, that's a very loaded question.
I'm so sorry.
Parking is people are very passionate about parking. So we receive a lot of comments on a daily, on an hourly basis. So we're working very hard with the parking team to get communications out. We've revamped the website. We had training today, and our customer service associates will be trained. So I know with any new program, there's always little hiccups, but we're trying to get in front of a lot of them, and we'll do our very best to roll this out and launch it. So yeah, starting tomorrow, but there is no rush. If I could give anybody any advice, there is no rush to register tomorrow. We have lots of time to register before the rollout in January of paid parking. So I don't want everybody to rush to the site tomorrow, because we will not be able to handle that. But there's lots of time to register, and we're here to help. I think Communications has plans to visit certain areas throughout the township to help people with the portal. And of course, we're always here at the township office to help.
And just an added comment, I do want to thank you, Carrie and Devlin, for handling the adjudication process so far. I had a resident that is very happy with you accommodating a request, so thank you.
Thank you. That's nice to hear that we did a little trial, and nice to hear that it was well received. Thank you.
Councillor, who was over here? How about Councillor Adams? Yep.
Thank you, through you. More just a comment, because I've seen these maps a number of times, and they still cause me a little bit of confusion sometimes, even with having hopefully some awareness on the topic. And I'm just kind of curious, are these the same maps that might be posted on the website? Or I don't know if there's a way to make them a little bit more user friendly. I think you definitely have to be aware of the area in order to kind of fully see where the maps are. I don't know. Maps are difficult. I get it. But if there's anything more we can do to make them user friendly, I think it might help. Yeah.
Yep. No, appreciate the comment. We will look at that. We're hopeful and optimistic that through the installation of the kiosks and the signage and the mapping, it becomes a little bit more apparent and clear. Once the program is up and running, I think there will be a portion of that initial rollout that will kind of speak to the education piece of it, appreciating that we also have a large tourist community that visits us. But we remain cautiously optimistic, and it will be, we have to draw a line in the sand. We will go live, and we will continue to monitor and make enhancements as necessary.
Councillor Walton.
Thank you. I do have a question, but I just wanted to comment on the Fergus piece, because I want to remind everyone that staff did a really good job of engagement with the Fergus BIA and the Elora BIA, and it was very clear that the situation was quite different between the two towns, and the Fergus BIA was quite clear that the paid parking would not be appropriate at this time. So I just want to remind, there was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes to get to this point. So I just want to remind everyone of that. My question about the paid parking in Elora is just, do we have an evaluation plan in mind? I guess getting back to a little bit of the previous report on engagement, how will we know it's successful? Are we achieving what we're hoping in terms of that turnover and kind of more efficient use of the parking spaces that we do have? So just curious about kind of how we're going to look at measuring success. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wilton, and through you, Mayor Waters. Really, we're looking at the evaluation criteria being twofold. Obviously, the notion of a paid parking implementation is twofold: one, to generate revenue, and two, to increase utilization statistics. From a revenue standpoint, staff will obviously monitor and report back to council on a regular basis in terms of how we're trending and against the the financial forecast that's been developed as part of the kind of the phase one rollout. And from a utilization standpoint, we do have some metrics that were done through kind of the parking strategy report. And I feel that once operational after a period of time, be it 12 or 18 months, we can have a look at those utilization rates again to determine what kind of headway we're making with the rollout of the program. So that's how staff's kind of envisioning kind of the evaluation criteria at this point.
Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, sir. Through you, Adam. So, first of all, is there any grace being given? So we roll out in respectfully, I'm talking more for our residents than our tourist population, but is there any grace given in case, for whatever reason, they're not on social media and so they don't know that they need to do this or didn't read the paper the one or two times it came out? I'm just a little concerned that we're going to come in here without allowing the removal of barriers, which is something that's so important to all of us. And on that note, can we possibly, recognizing the cost of signage, and I hear you speaking to signage, you know, one of the things that I know my colleagues and I hear a lot is that there wasn't enough clarity in any given situation around signage on the road. Is there a way to up the amount? I know it's a big ask, I know it's a budget ask, but I think if we're super clear, this road has charges, this road doesn't, like, I just feel like the more we can do to inform the public, the better. And if it means spending a little bit more money on signage and the staff to put them in, maybe that's the best route for the first 6 months or a year.
Yep. Thank you for the comment, Councillor Evoy, and through you, Mayor Waters. I think the signage, and there has been quite a lot of discussion around signage at the staff level. I believe we feel it adequate for the purposes of the rollout. I don't recall the exact number of signs, but it's 100 and it's north of 100, certainly 150. So that, in addition to the kiosks, I think it will become quite apparent. And I think if you go too far on the signage side of things, it becomes almost like signage pollution. So we feel that through kind of the efforts from a communication standpoint, having the 1 month kind of exemption period for registration, that will help get the word out as well through word of mouth and other channels through our own communications, that we have kind of dotted the I's and crossed the T's, if you will, from a rollout standpoint. From a grace perspective, we haven't contemplated that to this point at the staff level. I mean, we are giving everyone an opportunity to register a month in advance of the rollout period through the signage. If they haven't had the opportunity to register to that point, they would be expected to pay, understanding that even though you pay, if you hadn't registered at that point, if you are a resident of the township, you still have the opportunity to register as the program continues to roll out, not within that 1 month only, where we're going to have that kind of lead into from an exemption standpoint.
I see you looking at my face because I am a little concerned about that for the people that aren't on social media or who don't get out as often. So I'm assuming, looking again to comms, we're putting it out in the newspaper and as many ways as we can possibly find for the people that aren't online as well.
But just perhaps if I could comment very quickly, the intent would be that it would be social, our website, newspaper, and radio ads to kind of augment and roll out the communication stream. But
maybe the senior center. Is it?
Yes, so we will be putting posters up at all of our locations, and I am running 2 sessions at the senior center. So there's 2 lunches that they're having where they have majority of their membership at. So I'll be there for 2 hours showing people how to use it and all of that, because a lot of them don't go online. So we'll have that. I'll also be at the Sportsplex based on how well the information session goes at the Victoria Park Senior Center, but we're available anytime. Our staff are amazing. They were trained today. So if anyone has any questions, they're welcome to drop in here too. And we'll go other locations as well. So I'm open to that as well, similar to what we did for the engagement strategy. So if there's, everybody's listening right now, you can contact me and we can drop by and do things like that as well. So no problems at all. Yes, and newspaper, website. We're also working with Hydro as well to see if we can get it in their bill statements as well, now that the postal strike is a little bit better to work with. So.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters, I just want to clarify. So we have kiosks and we're doing an app too, or just the kiosks?
Yep, thank you for the question, Councillor McDonald, and through you, Mayor Waters. It's not an app per se, it is a site. So the site is accessible through any digital medium, be it your cell phone, desktop computer, and we are providing kiosks throughout the Elora downtown core for those that do not have access to a smart device to help pay for parking. So with that, that's the intent, is that it would be completely digital and paperless, and that would be the intended rollout.
I have used one recently where you just scan the QR code and it's one payment, flat rate, and that was it. Will it be that simple?
The intent would be that the signage would also house the QR code. So if you are moving about after you've parked your vehicle, you would kind of scan the QR code. If you are smart device ready, it would take you to the payment site, and then you would input your plate number, the appropriate time, and then off you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions for Adam as it relates to this? Again, appreciate time and effort and staff, and this has been a major project, and we're not even at the rollout yet, but we're close. So, but I really appreciate, and I know Council really appreciates all the effort of all the individuals involved. So please extend that on our behalf. Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Central Wellington receive report core 2025-72 for information. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Adams, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's so moved. Okay, so now let's move down to item 9, bylaws. First bylaw, 2025-74, a bylaw to appoint members to the Board of Management of the Elora Business Improvement Area pursuant to S-204-3 of the Municipal Act as amended, and to repeal bylaw 2025-52. Next, bylaw 2025-75, a bylaw to exempt block 19 and part of block 16, 21, 22 of the registered plan 61M-227 from the part lot control provisions of the Planning Act. Next, bylaw 2025-76, bylaw to designate the property municipally known as 300 St. Andrew Street West, Fergus, in the Township of Central Wellington to be a property of cultural heritage value and or interest pursuant to Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next, bylaw 2025-77, a bylaw to designate the property municipally known as 298 Union Street East, Fergus, in the Township of Central Wellington to be a property of cultural heritage value and or interest pursuant to Section 29 of Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next, bylaw 2025-78, a bylaw to designate the property municipally known as 219 Farley Road, Fergus, in the Township of Central Wellington to be a property of cultural heritage value and or interest pursuant to Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Recommendations that bylaws 2025-74 through and to 2025-78 be read a first, second, and third time and passed signed by the mayor and clerk and corporate seal affixed. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Craddock, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Notice of motions. Motions where notice have been given. Confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to confirm the actions of council. Recommendations that bylaw 2025-79 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held November 24th, 2025 be introduced a first, second, and third time and passed in open council. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Jefferson, seconder on that. Councillor McDonald, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Do I have a mover for adjournment? Councillor McDonald, seconder on that. Councillor Craddock, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So move. We are so adjourned.